Hello, you're watching TVP World Talks. I'm Jonasz Rewiński. Ukraine's struggle against Russian invasion has entered a new phase with both hopes for a peace deal and an increased pressure from Moscow. The latter took the form of bringing even more suffering to the citizens of Kiev, with blackouts amidst freezing winter weather posing an acute risk to those most vulnerable, such as children or the elderly. The Russian war crimes are making the headlines, but will they provoke a Western response? Joining us here today is Rostyslav Khotin, senior editor at Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty's Ukrainian Service. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Hello, Jonasz.
So let's make it clear about the situation in Kiev. Roughly how many people are affected by the rolling blackouts and by the lack of heating today?
The left bank of Dnieper River in Kiev, the left bank of Ukrainian capital, is experiencing total blackouts quite often. Also, Kiev region is severely affected by these blackouts because especially from the very beginning of January, Russia has struck many energy installations, energy infrastructure in Kiev and around Kiev. Now, let's say there are 3 hours of electricity supplies, then like 9 hours without electricity. People have to cope without electricity, especially taking into account the difficulties with weather, because there was a very cold spell in Ukraine, central Ukraine. The weather dropped up to -20 even in the night. And imagine people being at home with no electricity, no heat, sometimes even no water for many, many hours in darkness, in total blackout, in severe cold weather with temperatures dropping to almost -20. So the Ukrainian Security Service said that these constitute to crimes against humanity on the Russian side. The Ukrainian Security Service accused Russia of almost like a genocide against Ukrainians when you deliberately target energy infrastructure in a harsh winter. The Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko said that this particular winter, is the harshest, the most difficult winter of all 4 war winters that Ukraine experienced since 2022 Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine. So it's extreme people. The witness, I can quote a witness who said that they sleep in full clothes with under 3 blankets in the night, in freezing temperatures. So it's extremely difficult situation, which constitute indeed, as Ukrainian Security Service said, a crime against humanity.
Do you think that the West has somehow forgotten the concept of humanitarian intervention? I mean, we're talking about a risk to the life and well-being of ordinary people, and it's not like it began today. I mean, it's been a war that lasted for over 3 years. Yet somehow the public debate has veered away from even, the concept of helping in a way that goes beyond simply sending money. Why is that so, do you think? Why is the Western public opinion seemingly no longer noticing the day-to-day suffering of a country in the middle of Europe in the 21st century?
First of all, the world's attention is concentrated on peace efforts, on peace deal, on election in Ukraine, on military supplies, on situation on the front line, and so on and so forth. And somehow this extremely difficult, extremely harsh situation with electricity supplies is somehow overlooked by the rest of the world. But Ukraine has called for so-called energy Rammstein, to collect funds for the immediate help to Ukrainian energy sector to cope with this to blackouts and lack of electricity. The Ukraine is also calling for increased electricity supplies to Ukraine. Just these days, Britain has allocated 30 million dollars to Ukrainian energy infrastructure to defend Ukrainian energy infrastructure and repairs of energy infrastructure. Germany just gave 60 million euros to help Ukrainian energy infrastructure to cope with this Russian strikes against energy installations. So we cannot say that the world is ignoring, but the needs are more urgent. And Ukraine indeed counts on Western support to its energy infrastructure, because Russia deliberately targets with drones energy installations like thermal stations, like transformator stations, electricity lines, strategic electricity lines, and so on so forth. And it's not just about Kiev. Russia is also targeting energy infrastructure in Odessa region. Odessa the city of Odessa, one of the biggest in Ukraine, also experiencing blackouts. Recently, earlier this month, two Ukrainian regions, Dnipropetrovsk region and Zaporizhzhia region, were put in the total blackout for many, many hours after Russian drone strikes. It happened on the 7th of two important industrial Ukrainian regions. Up to 1 million people were affected with these blackouts in Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhzhia region. Kharkiv, or the Ukraine's second largest city, is also.
So we're talking about a situation that has been going on for quite a while, with major cities all across Ukraine being deliberately targeted by the Russians. Now, we did experience some intermittent problems with sound. I do hope that we have our connection back. If so, I would like to ask a question concerning the potential response, because we're talking about money being sent to bring the energy infrastructure back online. But what if Russia keeps destroying it? What if winter does not go away and instead we'll be facing an even more acute humanitarian crisis? Can you imagine this happening without some sort of intervention? Having Western systems eliminate aerial threats, unmanned aerial threats like drones and missiles. So not really confronting Russian troops on the ground or even mid-air, but shooting down these aerial threats before they can inflict even more damage. This is what Ukraine had been asking for from the very start of the war. It didn't happen. But do you think that this, perhaps, should be the moment when the West might, at some point, reconsider its decision?
Ukraine counts now on this so-called energy Rammstein to be held very soon. Also, Ukrainian morale has been boosted by the fact that the half of winter has been passed already. The winter is past the equator of the winter period. The heating season has been passed already. We are in the second half of January already. So spring is coming. And also there are, there are calls in Ukraine for Ukrainian armed forces to target with drones Russian energy infrastructure in kind of tit for tat kind of exercise, that if you're targeting our energy infrastructure and put our people on the brink of survival in harsh winter, that Ukrainians also should target Russian energy infrastructure, Russian thermal power stations, and so on and so forth. So there are calls in Ukraine for Ukrainian armed forces actually to deliberately target also Russian energy infrastructure. But so far, Ukraine has been targeting only military infrastructure on the territory of Russian Federation.
So there, of course, have been blackouts in some Russian regions at the border. But nevertheless, as you said, Ukraine is focusing on the military targets in Russia. Now, do you believe that there is enough momentum for a possible peace deal? President Zelensky indicated that it is likely that a deal perhaps could be signed as early as during the summit in Davos. But we still don't know what Russia is going to do, and Russia is showing no indication of really wanting any sort of peace.
You know, there is now a good momentum for the peace efforts. Ukrainian delegation headed by Secretary of Security and Defense Council, Rustam Umerov. Also, he is joined by newly appointed head of presidential office, Kirilo Budanov. and also the head of pro-presidential faction in the parliament, David Arahamia, they are in the United States, where they will hold talks with Americans. Probably there is expectations that some kind of peace deal might be signed in Davos next week between Ukraine and the American side. Also, it's kind of not a big deal, but the security guarantees which America could provide to Ukrainians after the war ends, after peace is achieved. Also, there might be a deal on post-war reconstruction of Ukraine to achieve prosperity in Ukraine. As American negotiators said, it's kind of phrase of prosperity, prosperous Ukraine after the end of the war. So it's been finalized. The peace deal is almost finalized, except for two sticking points. One is territorial concessions, which Ukraine is probably under pressure to make, especially in Donetsk region. We'll see how it goes. And second one, the management of Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which is under Russian occupation almost since the start of the war. Security guarantees. As for security guarantees, now the Europeans took a lead. There might be peace contingent deployed in Ukraine, in the western part of Ukraine. Maybe estimations are like 15,000 soldiers. We'll see. But this is led by Britain and France, and I think they reached a point of no return, despite Russian objections to deployment of these peace troops in this security force in Ukraine. I think French and Brits are already kind of achieved the point of no return, and they have to deploy despite Russian objections. But apparently there will be no American troops on the ground because Donald Trump's administration does not see the possibility of deploying American troops, but nevertheless, they will provide the intelligence information to Ukraine, space intelligence, satellite intelligence, aerial intelligence, and so on and so forth. There will be American security guarantees. Probably there is also disagreement because Washington wants to give Ukraine security guarantees just for 15 years, 15 years. But President Zelensky wants security guarantees for 40 or 50 years. We'll see how it goes.
And one final question. How should we treat Moscow's attempts to derail this peace deal? Moscow claimed there was an attack on Putin's residence. That proved to be false. Moscow also keeps insisting that Western troops would be legitimate targets. And yet, whenever there is something that is actually happening, like the US seizing an oil tanker under Russian flag, Moscow, well, it does protest, but it really does nothing. Should the West behave bolder now that Russia clearly isn't the sort of country that it used to be? It's no longer the Soviet Union. It is known for some really voluble protests, but when it comes to taking action, it often fails to deliver.
You know, there should be a stick and carrot approach to Russia. On one hand, if they are involved in peace talks and promising to achieve peace in Ukraine, there might be some carrots, but the sticks should be there also. Like the European Union is now discussing the 20th package of sanctions against Russia. In the United States, there is bipartisan bill, draft of the bill for secondary sanctions against countries which buy Russian cheap oil and so on and so forth, against Russian shadow fleet of tankers, against other Russian sectors like financial, energy sector. So there should be a two-sided approach, sticks and carrots, and sticks should be very powerful, and Russia should know if there will be no desire on Moscow's part to achieve peace in Ukraine this year, there should be harsh response from both the United States and the Europeans.
And luckily we're seeing some actions against the shadow fleet also from our European partners, like recently Germany and the United Kingdom. Rostyslav Khotin was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
Thank you.
And I'm Jonasz Rewiński. You're watching TVP World. Please do stay with us.